Imagine sitting in a plane that is plummeting toward a cliff face at 200 miles per hour. The pilot has one chance to land. If he misses, there is no going around. From runways made of solid ice that could crack under the weight of the aircraft to landing strips so short they look like aircraft carriers floating in the ocean, these airports push pilots to their absolute limits. The locations you are about to see turn every takeoff and landing into a life or death struggle. And the airport at number 1 is so terrifying that only a handful of pilots on Earth are allowed to fly there. 10. Wellington International Airport, New Zealand. Pilots call this place the washing machine. Violent winds from the Cook Strait funnel through the mountains and hit the runway from every direction. Passengers frequently scream as planes are tossed sideways just feet above the ground. The turbulence here is notorious even for seasoned travelers. The runway ends with a drop straight into the freezing ocean waters. One strong gust at the wrong moment could be disastrous. Wellington is nicknamed Windy Wellington for a reason. It sits in a wind tunnel between two islands. Landings are often aborted due to wind shear. The runway is relatively short for international jets. It creates some of the bumpiest landings in the world. 9. Gibraltar International Airport, Gibraltar. This is the only airport in the world where a 4-lane highway cuts directly across the runway. Cars and pedestrians must wait at stoplights for massive jets to pass. It looks like a chaotic intersection between a city street and a major airport. One mistake by a driver or a pilot could lead to a catastrophic collision. The runway also extends out into the ocean on reclaimed land. Pilots have to brake hard immediately after touching down to avoid the water. Winston Churchill Avenue intersects the runway. Barriers close the road during every takeoff and landing. The Rock of Gibraltar creates unpredictable wind currents. It is considered the most dangerous airport in Europe. The runway is only 6,000 feet long. 8. Barra Airport, Scotland. On this remote island, there is no tarmac. There is no concrete. Planes land directly on the sand of a wide beach. This is the only airport in the world where scheduled flights use a tidal beach as a runway. Pilots have to read the ocean as well as the sky. If the tide is high, the runway disappears completely underwater. Emergency landings here at night require cars to line up and shine their headlights onto the sand. Flight schedules are dictated entirely by the ocean tides. The sand can be soft, causing wheels to sink. 7. Ice Runway, Antarctica. In the coldest place on Earth, heavy cargo planes land on a sheet of frozen seawater. There is no pavement, only deep blue ice over a dark ocean. The ice must be perfectly monitored for cracks. If the plane is too heavy or sits in one spot too long, it could break through and sink. Pilots report that the ice sags under the weight of the wheels. It is a terrifying dance between heavy machinery and fragile nature. The runway is built on sea ice floating over deep water. It is rebuilt every year at the start of the season. Operations stop when temperatures rise and ice melts. 6. Madeira Airport, Portugal. This island airport looks like an engineering miracle and a pilot's nightmare. The runway sits on a platform raised above the ocean by 180 massive columns. On one side lies steep volcanic cliffs. On the other, a sheer drop into the Atlantic. There is nowhere to go if something goes wrong. The wind slams into the mountains and rolls down onto the runway. Pilots must fight heavy turbulence until the very last second. The runway was extended after a tragic crash in 1977. 180 pillars hold the structure 70 meters high. Only specially trained pilots can land here. The approach requires a tight turn at the last minute. Crosswinds are famously difficult to manage. 5. Courchevel-Altaport, France. Nestled in the French Alps, this runway looks more like a ski slope than an airport. It is incredibly short and has a steep uphill gradient. Pilots have to land going uphill to slow down. Taking off requires speeding downhill toward a terrifying drop-off. There are no lights and no instrument guidance. If heavy fog rolls in, planes are completely blind in a maze of mountains. The runway is only 537 meters long. It serves an exclusive ski resort for the wealthy. Only certified mountain pilots are permitted access. 4. Princess Juliana International, Saint Martin. This is famous for the most terrifying beach photos on the internet. Massive jumbo jets fly just 10 to 20 feet above the heads of tourists. People cling to the fence as jet engines blast them with sand and heat. The force is strong enough to blow people into the water or concrete. The runway is extremely short for heavy aircraft. Pilots must clear the beach fence and slam the brakes immediately to stop before hitting the mountain at the other end. Planes pass incredibly close to Maho Beach. Jet blast creates winds up to 100 miles per hour. Tourists have been injured and killed by the engine blast. It offers the most spectacular plane spotting on Earth. 3. Wancho-e-Irausquan Airport, Sabah. Pilots call this the aircraft carrier. The runway is the shortest commercial strip in the world, perched on a rocky cliff surrounded by water. It is barely longer than the deck of a large ship. If a pilot overshoots by even a few feet, the plane tumbles into the Caribbean Sea. Both ends of the runway drop vertically into the ocean. Taking off feels like flinging the aircraft off a cliff edge. The total runway length is only 400 meters. It is flanked by high hills and steep cliffs. Jet aircraft are strictly forbidden from landing here. Strong sea breezes make the approach unstable. 2. Paro International Airport, Bhutan. Hidden deep in the Himalayas, this approach is so difficult that fewer than 20 pilots in the world are certified to fly it. The plane must weave through a narrow valley. Wings tips come dangerously close to the mountainsides. Passengers can look out the window and see the trees rushing by. There is no radar guidance. Pilots must fly entirely by sight, banking sharply just seconds before the wheels touch the ground. The airport is surrounded by peaks 18,000 feet high. Flights are only allowed during daylight hours. Strong valley winds restrict landings to mornings. The runway is not visible until the very last moment. It is the only international airport in the entire country. 1. Tenzing Hillary Airport, Lukla, Nepal. This is the gateway to Mount Everest and the most dangerous airport on the planet. The runway is built on a steep incline carved into a mountainside. At one end is a solid stone wall. At the other is a 2,000-foot drop into a dark valley. There is absolutely no room for error. Once a pilot commits to landing, they must touch down or crash. There is no turning back. The airport sits at over 9,000 feet of elevation. The runway is only 527 meters long. The weather changes from clear to blinding fog in minutes. It has a steep 12% gradient to help slow planes. Numerous tragic accidents have occurred here over the years. You have just witnessed 10 airports that turn flying into an extreme sport. Runways on ice. Landings on beaches. Approaches that weave through deadly mountain peaks. Which airport would you be too scared to fly into? Would you stand on the beach at St. Martin to feel the jet blast? Or would you trust the pilots at Lukla? If these terrifying landings got your heart racing, hit that subscribe button. We take you to the edge of the world and back. The next video explores roads that are even deadlier than these runways.